Hello there, and welcome to the first edition of Making News from Make UK. This is a monthly report to Make UK members about what the team here is doing and how it impacts your business. We'll be meeting a variety of different team members over the course of these reports, but for our first edition, I'm delighted to welcome Chief Executive Stephen Phipson. Stephen, plenty going on as always, but members will be keen to understand the implications of delays to the much awaited industrial strategy until June. Do you have any
Mm.
more news for us about that?
Well, the good news on that, Nick, is that we are very engaged in discussions with DBT and Treasury on the industrial strategy, and there's you can't fault the enthusiasm. There is a lot of work going on, and there's a lot of input going on. They've received about 3,000 submissions in the consultation that happened earlier in the year, and they're working through that. I think there is more work than they anticipated, if I'm honest with you. And you remember they're trying to pull together the 8 different pillars of the strategy, of which advanced manufacturing is, in our case, the most important one, but certainly one of those priorities. We are engaged in many roundtables and dinners and all sorts of other things with government officials at the moment. And the timing moving to June is to coincide with the spending review. So the spending review now is going to be in June. They want to launch the industrial strategy at the same time as the CSR. So I think actually the spending review is the gating factor here in terms of timing.
Obviously, members out there who've been considering investment,
Yeah.
recruitment, and training, and so on, many of them have hung their hat on the fact that things are going to change for the positive, and this delay
Mm.
has perhaps led them to feel a little bit worried about it. You're saying, hang on, it's everything's okay. It's just being it's more of an administrative
Yeah.
delay rather than anything else.
So those people that are waiting for it, of course, I understand that position. We have not large members and small members that have spoken to me about, everything from FDI coming into the country, waiting to see what their long-term plan looks like, through to small companies thinking about what kind of incentives might be available for people to invest and things going forwards around an industrial plan. Where are those priorities? Completely understand that, but let's wait until June and see where we get to. And I think it's only a couple of more months than we expected, Nick.
The Prime Minister has pledged an increase in defence spending because of the political crisis
Yeah.
around Ukraine. Now obviously, that's going to be good news, ill wind, etc. That's going to be good news for the sector here, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I've been intimately involved with the defense sector for many years. And, in many areas, we are world leading in what we can produce in this country. I think there's been a kind of fixation about buying foreign equipment sometimes where we could have done more what I would call sovereign capability. I think attention is now turning to more to do with what we can do onshore in the UK. How can we build up the defense industrial base? We're seeing many members benefiting in the short term from some of those initiatives. But as part of the industrial strategy, we've also, of course, Nick, got the defence industrial strategy coming through as well, which I know is being reconfigured again. We've just about to put in another load of work and submissions around the defence industrial strategy, which is going to talk about how we do scale up UK industry to cope with the new environment that we're living in. And I think we are certainly going to see an increase in defence spending. I'm not sure 2.5%, 3%, whatever it might be. But the key message from us is let's make some of that stuff. Let's make the majority of that in the UK. Let's build up our own industrial base. That's absolutely vital for our own freedom of action and our own security more than anything else.
Also, Stephen, trade is very much up for discussion as part of the regulatory review around the European Union. But also, of course, President Trump and the threat of tariffs is
Yeah,
causing people to examine very closely what our trading relationships to Europe and the USA are going to look like.
they are indeed. I mean, we've been talking to government about what we'd like to see in the changed relationship with the EU. You'll remember that half the exports of the country are manufactured goods, and a very high proportion of those exports go to the EU. In manufactured goods exports, proximity is everything. The EU remains our biggest single block customer. If we look at that in terms of an export market, and making trade easier, bringing down some of those barriers, particularly non-tariff barriers, and getting our alignment right. We are talking the same language with this government, Nick. We are gradually moving towards a better place. And I feel very confident about that. We're certainly inputting a lot of detail as to what we want to see in terms of improving the TCA or the agreement we've got with the EU to make it easier for our manufacturers to access the EU market. So I'm really very optimistic that we're going to see some movement on that going forwards. And in a way, the current geopolitical differences and the position of the US is kind of strengthening that European resolve to a certain degree. So we might see action sooner than later, and we will be continuing to push government on that. The US situation is somewhat different. We're still not very clear on what Trump's going to do about tariffs with the UK. We've heard about the steel tariffs. And our worry there is more about things like trade diversion, really. I mean, if we end up with a 25% tariff in steel going into the US, the worry is that those other exporters that were exporting to the US will then choose to export to the UK and start flooding the UK with cheaper products because there's no tariff regime here. So we need to have the right protections in place in our own market to make sure we don't get any second order effects of Trump increasing tariffs in the US market, for example. So again, a lot of discussions going on with government about the options for protecting our own industry in terms of those trade diversion type characteristics that we might see as a result of what Trump is. But of course, we're still waiting to see what his final determination is on all the other exports. And that's important because 20% of our exports overall, I mean, the US is a single country as our biggest export market. It's 20% of the exports, and it's a very important business for us. It tends to be in the high-end advanced manufacturing or luxury automobile type businesses rather than sort of commodity products. But again, we need to see exactly what he is going to do with the UK. Let's see if our Prime Minister can make some progress on that this week. I think that's what we're looking forward to.
Well, all of this is going to provide a pretty dramatic backdrop for the great National Manufacturing Conference, which is going to be held next week
Yeah.
in London. As I say, a dramatic backdrop, but a conference that, as always, is a tremendous celebration for Make UK members.
It is, Nick, and this year stronger than ever. We've outsold the conference. We're sort of overflowing with people wanting to come along. We've got the most senior representatives, except for the Prime Minister's not coming, but we've got cabinet level representatives coming to speak at our conference, keen to do that, keen to reinforce the commitment the government's got to manufacturing. And actually, it's more important than ever because it's not just about the great quality jobs and the innovation and the investment we do. It's about national security. It's about the fact that we need to be more resilient. We need to be manufacturing more things in the UK. And of course, manufacturing is the key enabler to net zero going forward. You'd have seen some reports recently about the scale of growth that we're seeing in net zero manufacturing. And of course, all of that will be celebrated at our conference next week. And that's why it's attracting such a lot of attention. And that's why we've got some pretty, the top senior cabinet representatives coming along to the conference next week. And I think most of our members that are able to get to the conference will find that very, very rich and very, very, very interesting in terms of the position of the government.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Have a great time at the conference, which, of course, we'll all be hearing about next week. And to everybody watching, thank you very much for being with us on the first edition of Making News from Make UK.